I had the privilege of being invited by the American Bee Journal for the August edition, this month's edition, to do an article, and the title of the article is called Success Starts with Attitude. Here's a little glimpse, and here's a little glimpse too of one more mistake that I've made in bees and business in general. There's 9 different principles that I wrote on in this article, and I started the article by making very clear that it is far from an exhaustive list, but it's a good start. And I've had several people contact me asking me whether I would do a course on commercial beekeeping or the business of beekeeping. And business for me, between business and people, those are my two great loves. And so it's an area that's certainly of interest to me. But something that this article focused on, and I want to do a YouTube video series, each video dealing with a principle. And so we'll deal with the first principle here today. But there's also a little bit, obviously, of me introducing these following 9 videos that are going to take place. And that is that really it's the psychology that's very, very important whenever you're approaching business. Business, by its very nature, is all about problem solving. And you need to make sure that when problems arise, and they do, whether you're in business or not, as I'm sure all of you are very aware if you're living, is how do you phrase or how do you put into context the problem? What's the story that you're attaching to it? And the story that I have far from perfected, but that I am always consciously trying to reiterate when problems take place, whether it's in the bee business or in the other businesses that we're involved in, I'm always trying to frame the problem in the context of let's look at this as a fun challenge. Might even be a painful challenge, but let's dig deep and see how can we be creative in coming up with a solution. And so that type of psychology is very, very important to foster, because if you don't do that, you're probably going to end up like a lot of business people that maybe you've met and that I've met, which have a hard heart and a hard head. I like what one businessman told me, and he says, Kevin, aim to have a strong mind, but to keep and maintain a tender heart. Things happen, and this is the first principle on this article, and this is the first principle that I'll do a brief synopsis of here. And that first principle is life is unfair. And the sooner that you acknowledge that, the sooner that you accept that, the better off you are. It's rather counterintuitive, but by accepting that life is unfair, it is actually putting you in a very empowering situation. Because so many of us, including myself in the past, have spent hours, if not days, if not weeks, talking and convincing ourselves of how unfair a situation is. And in beekeeping, we have a myriad of challenges. We have the challenge of, keep having a beard here, there we go, got it. We have a myriad of challenges in the sense of we have honey adulteration, we've got mite issues. In the commercial industry, it's pretty common to hear complaints about honey packers, about mono, whatever you call it, can't remember the term right now, but as far as in commercial agriculture, the growing of one type of crop, which obviously creates nutritional challenges for the bees. There's a multitude of things that we don't have direct control over. Tough. Is it unfair? What does it matter if it's unfair? How does that help us moving forward? And so the thing is that, yes, okay, fine. If you can get involved in the legislative processes that help, like with honey adulteration, that's a major issue that's affecting our industry. If there's a way for us to get involved on the legislative side to influence that domestic production, U.S. produced honey, Canadian produced honey, is protected, by all means, do that. But as far as discussing and regurgitating and ruminating on how unfair the industry has become because of this practice and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't do anything except convince you that you're powerless to change it. And the thing is that there are things that you can do to empower yourself. And so the key reason why it's important to acknowledge to yourself, okay, you know what, this is unfair, is because let's get that out of the way. Okay, it's unfair, it sucks, but what can you do to change it? And that is an incredible principle to apply to any and every area of your life. You think about the person who's complaining, well, my spouse did that and it's unfair. Okay, fine, it is. But are you just wanting to complain for the sake of complain, or do you want to do something about it? In any challenge or any situation, we're always given one of two options, and that is we can change our relationship with the problem, or we can change our expectations. Whatever situation you're in, those are the two options. Now, sometimes I think of the story of Viktor Frankl, the Jewish psychiatrist who is in Auschwitz. He did not have the power to change his situation, his physical situation. He was in the absolute embodiment of hell. But he did change his expectation and empowered himself by saying, you know what, they can take everything else away from me, but they cannot take away the freedom of choice I have to choose my attitude and to choose the meaning and the mental processing that I'm going to do through this time. And because he empowered himself of saying, I'm going to take control of my attitude, I'm going to take control of what's going on up here, he actually came up with the practice of logotherapy, which, without going into that, was life-changing for thousands, if not tens of thousands of people upon his release out of Auschwitz. So that's the first story. That is the first lesson, the first principle. Life is unfair. Accept it. Deal with it. Start focusing your energy on what you can change. Half of your bees died, 3/4 of your bees died because somebody sprayed pesticide next to you. Yeah, it's unfair. That's horrible. But guess what? You need to focus your energy on what can you do to start coming back from that. What opportunities are possibly within a tragedy like that? Whether it's to use it as a means of getting media publicity of the improper use of pesticides, to being able to maybe do a really amazing Kickstarter campaign. I don't know, I'm just coming up with this stuff as we're talking. Within every tragedy also lies opportunities. And so train your mind to look at those, acknowledge the unfairness, acknowledge the emotions, but then quickly move on to what can you do to empower yourself. Anyways, that's principle one, life and bees is unfair, from the journal, or from the article that I wrote for the American Bee Journal. There's 8 more principles, and we'll cover those in the following days. Have a great one.